More medications, less health. Something's broken. Traditional medicine manages symptoms, but true healing addresses root cause. I'm Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer. At Beyond the Pills, we merge ancient wisdom with modern day science to inspire you through stories of transformation, practical trainings, and holistic healing. Join me and other practitioners as we guide you towards vibrant health, body, mind, and spirit, and move beyond symptom management into true healing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Beyond the Pills. I'm Josh Rimini, your host, pharmacist turned healer. And today I have a very new friend of mine, Terri Lee-Shield. How are you, Terri?
Hello. Yes, I'm brilliant. Thank you. I'm really good. Happy to be here. Excited for the chat.
I'm gonna read your bio, and then we're gonna dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Terri is a creative designer and a writer who also offers support and mentorship. She offers a unique insight after following guidance of her spiritual path and embarking on a natural healing and recovery journey from addiction, mental health distress, and abuse trauma. Those are big things that we get to talk to these days. I love it. Terri shares grounded wisdom gained through life experience, connecting with nature, shadow work, and developing an ecosystem design process to create life-affirming systems. Embracing the attributes of her neurodiverse mind, we just talked about that, while overcoming the struggles of not fitting into the boxes of mainstream society, Terri loves to share her knowledge and wisdom to support and encourage others to choose themselves, embrace their creativity, and heal in a holistic, balanced way. How beautiful. Welcome, Terri.
Oh, thank you.
It's interesting hearing someone else speak your bio, right?
Yeah, it is. I was just going to say, you try and put what you are into a few sentences and what you're about and
it make everyone work. Well, we got lots to talk about because you've got your own journey of discovery and recovery, which has empowered you to do this thing and this neurodiversity. I haven't talked to people on my podcast, but that I'm a neurodivergent as well. So we get to talk about some of these things. So I guess we can apologize, if we will, to the audience in advance, because this might go in different directions.
It might, yes. It's most likely is definitely going to, I'm afraid.
and that's a beautiful thing because there is no one direction. So talk to us a little bit about who's Terri? What are you doing here? Why Beyond the Pills, right? What's going on with you?
Actually, it was quite fascinating when we were brought together, wasn't it? Connected in that way. It was just kind of coincidence. One of those things I just happened to see the opportunity to come up. And then once we got chatting, I thought, actually, this is so interesting because we both ended up, I'm sure we've had very different experiences. We've had very different paths into the same sort of awarenesses, but I just love how we so many of us around the world are just being guided to a new way of being and seeing the world and engaging in the world and embracing who we are. And mine came about, like I say, in probably a very, very different way to yours, but then we've ended up exploring exactly the same sort of topics and all the same sort of trail of thought, trail of feeling.
Well, I love it because this theme came to me last week, 2 weeks ago when I was on a retreat, was the center was there, and they had a phrase that really resonated with me, which is together but not the same. And I feel like that grabs the essence of that, right? The essence of this whole process of exploring our own consciousness as it relates to our own humanity, our own wholeness, our own passion-centered purpose on this planet, living our authentic lives. These are words people understand, but also as it mirrors and relates to this parallel of how the world is changing, right? And how we're opening up this world of the stuff on the outside versus the stuff on the inside. And so talk to us a little bit about your story, like how you got to that space, because it wasn't always like that, right, for you?
Oh, no. Well, it's funny because in some ways it was being neurodiverse. I just wanted to tap into that because actually some of these phrases that do this.
I don't think people understand that sometimes. Like we got to take the beginner's mind here because we both have it in our attributes here. When we come to understand this. So let's talk a little bit about it before we go. Like this concept of neurodiverse mind, right? It's in your bio, which means you totally resonate with it. So talk to people a little bit about what is that? What is it?
To me, I'm a creative, and I've always been a creative, and I've always looked at the world, processed the world, responded to the world differently to what it seemed like everybody else around me was. And I think it all comes together, this kind of spiritual exploration and understanding the mind better and the body, and exactly what you were saying about the same but different. I feel like we've all been brought together on a similar path and a similar thread of consciousness, but actually within that there's diversity. And the challenge that we are facing right now is how do you find love, harmony, and an interconnected way of being when everybody is actually diverse? Everybody sees the world in a slightly different way, has had these different experiences, thinks, responds, feels differently about potentially the same thing. So for me, it was kind of growing up in a place, in a culture that I never really felt like I fit in, knowing that I was different and trying to express myself in a way that never really kind of landed, and then having to learn how to mask, which is something people might have heard of related to that neurodivergency. It's like mimicking each other. So you end up becoming what you think the world wants to see in order to survive in it and to learn how to like be a part of a group or part of a acceptable part of society or whatever. So I kind of had lived my life under this always trying to fit in and not really working out. And that, I mean, that's a complex issue even in itself when you're talking about being a kid or a teenager and just not fitting in, and then ended up not really understanding scenarios and all the stuff that I went through as a young person. It was very complex. So anyway, I had kind of branched out in the world and I went into the media industry. So I was a photographer. I went down a route of design and photography and worked on the edges of the media industry. And my young adulthood, I was surrounded by other creatives. And so we're talking like this was, early this century. And it was a different world then. Like we didn't speak in these labels, but everyone I was connected to at that time was creative, was different, was unique, had, would probably fit in all sorts of these labels and boxes that we seem to have created now in society. And that was kind of my sweet spot where I found a lot of pleasure and joy in just being creative, except I had developed this mask, so I wasn't being myself, and it never felt fulfilling. And I felt like I was having to do things that I didn't want to do to fit, to just be in society, And I had developed really, really unhealthy coping mechanisms for that. I wasn't coping well. I was drinking too much. I was smoking. I was smoking weed, and I was caffeine drinks. My whole life, painkillers because of all of the, my whole life was literally being quenched by this consumption and unhealthy coping habits to just try and be fitting in and try and be somewhat normal while seemingly doing something that I loved that was getting corrupted by all that. So it came to a head for me in it was about 12 years ago now, so even more, sorry. The time goes by so quick. About 2011. I'm not very good with the time because obviously it was quite a traumatic time. And I had my spiritual awakening then. We can go in details if you want. I have talked about it in the past. It's not something that I don't talk about, but it's such a long time ago now. But that basically just completely shifted the trajectory of my life. So from then I was in London at the time, and I left that industry. I left that lifestyle and just started embarking on, I wanted to get well. I wanted to learn how to heal. I wanted to figure out what was going on, why I was having so many problems in life, and the way, the constant stress I was under. And it's taken quite a lot of unfolding. And then now I'm kind of at the end. Well, it's never the end. We're always unfolding who we are. But at that part of my life, for sure, like I'm now kind of just starting, I feel, into that process where the healing aspect is kind of ending. And actually I can just be myself now. I'm not trying. I'm not figuring out who I am anymore. I'm just being this person who
I love it
through all this.
We always talk about it. Like people get this whole process is, what I heard was a lot of deep stuff, and I want to bring it back a little bit. It's like, you knew you didn't quite, we call it fit in, right? But there is no fit in. No. I would just throw out the word or, put out the word and, right? If you put the word and in it, then it's like I didn't fit in and I was being in my own creative self. And I've had this phrase for many, many years, and these concepts become deeper. Like you said, it never ends. Like for me, one of them is don't be better, be different. It's been a resonance for me. And so you weren't in this sort of energetic match of where you were going with who you were. And it was something you knew, right? It's something you knew, but it wasn't like you can put your finger on it because it's an energy thing. It's not a physical, I don't live in this building because of this. It's no, it was an energy thing, right? It was this thing that just you knew, right? And then there was this awakening, right? This thing that happened where, and I have no problem if you want to talk through that, but for some people, it's just an aha moment, something that happens to them where it clicks, whether it's it could be, what I'm talking about is the relatability here. We all have this thing where we're going through, and whether it's a life-changing, I call it a peak emotional experience, right? Something happened where, for some people, it's having a heart attack, and it's just having that, aha, oh, I got to get my stuff together here, or else I'm not going to, there's that piece. Or it could be from plant medicine experience with a psychedelic or a breath work, or any spiritual or energetic or soul searching aha, right? You have that awakening. We call it the awakening because I say but it's us, it's we, it's everyone. Is you have that moment in time in this place where you see things from a very different perspective, and you go, oh, right? There's that knowing underneath that knowing that came up. So I love how you frame that up where, hey, it wasn't quite right. Something happened, right? There was a pivotal point in your life, and then things started to unfold in a different way. Did I get it right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was it's kind of a juxtaposition because I was actually, in some ways, like I say, kind of in my element because I was free from all the education system and everything. And I'd made choices in my life that allowed me to be in a place where I wanted to be. And then there was this undercurrent of all this other stuff going on. So this is why I say it's quite deep in things, because actually I dive right into it. If we go back to my bio, I talk about shadow work and life design. And for me, a healing journey has literally been uncovering. Sometimes I use the word karma, shadow work. It's all of that trauma conditioning that had literally led me to this point. And some of it was really dark. So it was like a peak of events in my life that were getting faster and faster and faster, more and more traumatic, more and more chaos that I was trying to cope with more and more. That literally led me to, I actually tried to kill myself. I feel like I did die. Like, it's weird. Like that event that was my spiritual awakening, if you like. I literally made a decision. I didn't want to live in that reality anymore. And I prayed for the first time that I had done for a very long time. So when I was young, I had kind of a connection with spirit, a connection with God. And then because of these traumatic events that happened, I completely shut that down. So that was kind of my rebellious turn, if you like, where I rejected a lot of that and got into these coping mechanisms that weren't very helpful for me, and making the wrong choices and putting myself in the wrong situations, often hanging out with people in environments that weren't healthy, and then just tolerating that more and more until it got to a point where it was unbearable. And when I woke up from that experience, I just wasn't the same. I couldn't be the same. Like, I think when you make a choice like that, and then you were given a second opportunity, like I have talked about it quite a lot. So if this does resonate with people and they want some deeper stuff about it, then I'm happy to share it. I have got a course about avoiding suicide and things, because it's so complex and people do not talk about this sort of thing in a very educated way. And one thing I've talked about it as well is people talk about it from the perspective of like the people left behind, poor suicide, like as if, energetically, as if it's a very bad thing, that if you make that choice, that you're weak, that you're disturbed, all this stuff, all this talk that goes around that, when actually, I feel very different about it. So I'm just a bit cautious sometimes about where and when and how I talk about it. One, because it can get us censored these days. And because it was just such a pivotal point in my life. Like, I call that my past life. Like, it is still this lifetime. Yeah. And I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for all that. But it was so long ago. It's like talking about somebody else, because from that experience, and it was obviously like a very strange experience process to go through, to suddenly like kind of be in a brand new awareness. I just had a brand new awareness of myself, the situation I was in, the consequences, like how it actually landed in us. And just knowing that I had been given this opportunity now to do different, to be in a different experience, to create a different kind of life. So that's like the other side of a lot of the stuff that I talk about. It was a long process, but I've just began to rebuild my life, but from a very different place. And again, like, recovery is not easy. Recovery is not easy for anybody. And like I say, it's been like 12, maybe it's more, 12, 13 years now that I've kind of shifted my lifestyle. So in some ways, the creative aspect of who I am and how I express in the world and things is similar, but I'm not the same person, if that makes sense.
No, well, it's an important piece, right? The pieces, the way I look at it is, this is happening in I call it my second mountain of life, right? There's this first mountain of life where you build everything, you go to school, you hang out with the right people, you do the thing, you have a family, you have a business, you grow the thing, everything on the outside. And then all of a sudden there's this little, I don't know, it's like an alarm clock or something goes off inside you. You're like, is this it? Or, is this all where this is going to happen? Like, you're asking these other questions that are more internal. Like, what am I here to do? What is my purpose? Like, because humans need that. We're divine beings living a human experience with these five senses. And we loved how you said it. Like, for some people, and the way that you're framing up death, right? The death is not necessarily a physical death, right? It's like you said, I'm a new person. Like I'm speaking almost from this, almost like a dream or some other past thing, because these deaths, if you will, and we can call them endings, we can call them new beginnings, right? Like what I heard you say is there's been a rebirth. There's this new Terri that emerged. We talk about transformation a lot, right? From a transformation perspective, it's the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. But in transformation, the butterfly can't change back into the caterpillar. It's going through a process of going from a completely different existence. And I think humans have this in them, right? We do. We have, usually 2 to 3 meaningful relationships in our lives. Esther Perel did an awesome podcast with Huberman about that. And so that means we have some energetic deaths, if you will, but I call them endings, right? Like however you want to frame it in your own mind, because I've gone through that process too. And that process on the other side is coming up against, so you talked about shadow work. So I want to talk about that too. And those shadows then become your gifts. And those gifts are really who you are. And we can move through that to the other side where that full, authentic, best version of ourselves, like person, emerges, right? And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with a friend of mine about the transformation process too, because sometimes we think of like caterpillar, then butterfly. But you said it was like 12 years, right? This sort of in between.
I was just going to say that. Everyone likes to imagine that it goes from caterpillar to butterfly, but there's 12 years of goop.
That's what we say. Like we talked about, it's like, well, what happens when the caterpillar is not a caterpillar, but not quite a butterfly yet? Well, it's in a chrysalis and it's literally a pile of goo. Like there's a time in people's lives where you said it, it's not easy to move through this, but I fully believe, like when we are in making decisions for our highest self, the universe does start to conspire with us with that. You called it, you talked about the karma thing, right? Like I just have this vision of like, the universe kind of kicks you a little bit. You didn't get the lesson. It kicks you a little bit harder. You didn't get the lesson, right? You're learning, but you didn't really get it. And then all of a sudden it kind of throws you in the middle of the street, like feeling, right? It's like it gets to that point where the ball of string runs out for people.
Well, actually, I think, so there's a few things that you've kind of touched on there that I've dived really deep in. One, I actually have what I call the metamorphosis method, which is one of the really simple understandings for a life design process, which talks about exactly what you've just talked about. This
is amazing. Yeah, so I want to talk about it.
It's just, so there's quite a few of the tools that I've developed over the years to share some of the understandings. But I think it's more than like, so you've got this phase of the caterpillar and exactly what you said. You're kind of building up who you are. You're growing, you're taking in all this information and you become a really big, juicy caterpillar. And then actually you realize that there's something more that you want. The cocoon, the pupa, whatever the chrysalis, that's the right word. The chrysalis is its own being, but it's made of different stuff. And we have to go through it to get to the other end if you want to come out the butterfly. And that process is not anything like scientists, biologists, they can't even explain that. Nobody knows what happens in that chrysalis. That is a miracle of nature that we cannot understand. We can see that this caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and it literally turns into goop and then comes out the other end, a butterfly with wings. And I feel like that's the second stage that kind of gets glossed over. And that's why it's linked with a spiritual awakening, because it's we can't really explain it. It's the point where nothing makes sense anymore. And more so than when we talk about karma, we think about often the universe teaching us lessons. And definitely, I would agree that's how I used to did see all that for a long time. But because I'm coming out of that phase now, I kind of see things a bit different. So I don't want to share things that's going to rush someone through a process, because you have to go through the goop. More so than it's the universe, I think we want that. We go through this periods or these experiences that don't feel aligned, that don't feel right, and that part of us longs for a rightness, and it can get very complex in the goop. We can dive into all these ideas about like karma or generational trauma and generational karma and past lives and all this that goes on in shadow work, trying to figure out why we might have created this reality or had this experience, why we were given it. But actually, part of us just wants some sort of rightness, to feel like right, to feel like good. So we create this for ourselves. Yeah. It's not the universe that goes, you need to learn this lesson. We want to learn it. We want to be figuring out why we haven't got those wings. And actually there can be very complex reasons for that, deep complex reasons for that. And some of them, people get stuck in that stage in very various different ways. And some people can never come out the other side because it's not pretty and nice, and depend on what you've been given, what your starting point is. It might not be that you ever get to be a butterfly. There's plenty of chrysalises that, end up that they don't ever emerge. And that's not to say that's wrong or bad. It's just part of our reality, and it's part of nature, and it's part of that process of evolution. Only some of us get to go through them whole processes, and whatever part of the process you get to go through, that's your experience. Do you know what I mean? I've gone off a bit there, but I get all deep in the in the nature of it.
Some people, the story in our head goes, why can't I get that? And like you said, being right. Just like for me, it's righteousness, right? It's like the part of you that has to figure it out. So that's a big piece, right? When you talk about it, like this was a very huge lesson for me in Peru this year. Was one of my teachings was this concept of, there are some things in the world, in the energy world, right? Because let me just say the energy world, because you said it, science can't explain what actually happens in the chrysalis to move from here to here. And that's where my friend told me this, and it's stuck with me now, the West world, right? This thing over here in the West world is in the age of information, we want to think about we want to be able to prove the concept of here to here, like Newtonian physics. Well, there's this whole thing called quantum reality, quantum physics, quantum, like things that are happening in different time. That's why I say the word "and" now, because there's some things we can prove with science, and there's some things you just can't explain, right? How do you explain to someone why your body just breathes naturally by itself and the heart beats by itself, right? We have this in nature's intelligence, whether it's, you call it source, God, universe, this thing bigger than us. I call it half of the equation, right? The other half is what we do in it. And so I love that you played that out, because again, it's all the same, but from a different person, different perspective, different way because I call it the formula seems to be the same, right? That's steps in the formula. And I love how you actually have the steps sort of played out. But I want people to really sit with that concept, whether you meditate on it, whether you're just contemplating it, is just there are things that we cannot explain with our rational brain, but we still know exist. Like a synchronicity is one example. You can't explain how this, and this happened to make this conversation work, right? But it happened. And so there's this piece of surrender, if you will, or letting go around that component. So I wanted to pause just because that's a lot of times our analytical brain, and this is the biggest lesson I've had in my life. This analytical has been really good about protecting me and doing all the things that I did, because I'm an inquiry guy. I'm going to ask why. But now I'm starting to realize the question doesn't need to have an answer. If you inquire something.
And some of so everything that I share about, talk about, is that everything is connected and it's on different levels. Energy works in different levels. We are holistic beings. So our mind's part of the equation, and we need to, we have this innate thing we want to understand. And our brain, like our actual brain, our brain and our mind are different. Our brain is always seeking data and taking in information and figuring out exactly what you said, how to keep it safe, how to keep us safe. And we go through these egos, if you like, these masks, there's so many words that you can use to create it, these versions of ourselves to survive, because the reality is life is complicated and can be dangerous at times, even in the very safe world we think we've created. We're all gonna struggle at times. We're all gonna have hardships and all that, and that can be scary. And we try and think our way out of so much. But my journey, yes, the shadow work very much is based on the mind and freeing the mind, understanding yourself and why you made the decisions you did that led you into the experience you have and that sort of thing. But the body has this wisdom. As you said, the body can just heal itself. Given the right conditions, our body can heal. Like, it's programmed. Well, it's not even programmed. Who knows what the word is, but it's got this energy about it that it'll always try to restore itself. And we create the conditions where that's not possible, or that we make that more difficult than it needs to be, for many, many other reasons. And part of that is to do with our spiritual life, our emotional life, how we are expressing in the world, our relationships, the places we're in. All of this stuff kind of builds our reality. And you can get caught up a lot in talking or thinking about either one of them. So you can get caught up in just trying to fix the body. But actually, if there's all this other things going on, doctors know this. You can have the same person come in with this. They just end up, you give them a treatment and then something will, get better. And then they'll just come back a little bit later with exactly the same problem, and you try and fix it. And, these conditions that seem incurable and things, because the person is just repeating the same patterns. They're going back into the same environments that made them ill. I know people who've recovered from cancer and gone through that entire traumatic stress of having cancer, being, going through a healing process. And then a couple of years later, they've got cancer again, because they went right back into the same lifestyle, the same people, the same environments, the same thinking, the same feeling, and it just created the same result. So if somebody really wants to move through that process, we have to create this, space where we can start to question every aspect of our lives. If we really do want to transform, if you really want to heal. And what's really interesting is the more that I've gone through that process, now the less I try and change about myself, if that makes sense.
Totally. No, it does.
So it's like a complete acceptance at the end that, I am flawed, but I know who I am. I know who I am now. I know my strengths and weaknesses. I know potentially where I need to be more self-aware and where I completely let go. All of that stuff that kind of blocks us from being our authentic selves, for expressing the way we are, is all part of understanding all that goes on in the goop.
Well, it's you touched on some really good spaces. Like it's body, mind, soul, spirit, right? If we stick with the body, and you explain what I've been explaining about functional medicine for a whole long period of time, is like the body wants to be in homeostasis. It wants to be in balance. It knows what to do. We don't know why it does, but when you cut your finger, there's things that happen that heal your finger, right? We don't understand the whole. Now we can go down to the cellular level, but we also can get out onto the macro level. I call it the microscope or the telescope, right? They're both vantage points. But if we stick with body only, right? This is kind of where Western medicine sort of, all right, but you said it, relationships, your emotional component, like all of and I loved your reference of like going through cancer, getting healed, like taking the medicines. This is my cancer journey, right? When I was 16, like I went through all those things, but the intangibles that we can't explain, but still happen, right? Mindset. Like this is why the placebo effect is so amazing, but pharma washes it out because they don't want you to think that 30% of people get better off nothing. But that nothing is all those things we talked about. If we're moving the blueprint of the energy body through our thoughts, through our behaviors, through our choices, and through the balancing of it. So we're putting in good signals, we're taking out bad ones. You said it before, all those coping things that we know are bad for us, we still do. We're one of the only mammals on the planet that knowingly puts bad stuff in our bodies. We know it.
I enjoyed it.
But our mind is very different. The stories we have are very different than what the physical component and the downstream effects are. So I loved how you touched on all these beautiful places of body, mind, spirit, soul, getting all of those balance and supporting, like you said, if no change, no change. If you go through that process and you're fixed and the body is fixed, but you go straight back into your normal, whatever that was, same people, same environment, same, the toxicity, the imbalance that was created somewhere in that realm is going to come back in some way. And then that's where people relapse. So thank you for bringing all that up. There was a lot in that session there, but that was great.
Every time we chat, there's like more. I'm like, and this and this. But think about it this way as well. There's two things I want to put on in there that if people can understand about healing, I just think it like really shifts your mindset about things. When we cut ourselves and it heals, depending on the severity of the cut, we're going to be left with a scar. Now, for sometimes that scar fades over time and it might be gone, but other times that wound is, even though it's healed, it's going to create a scar that's going to completely change that area of our life. And we need to be respectful of that scar. It's there for a reason. And it's doing a very important job. It's reinforcing that we don't want to make that wound, that's a vulnerable spot, and we don't want to make that wound in the same place again. So if you're not paying attention to where and how you got cut and where your scars are, and then and now taking that into other realms, doing due diligence to make sure that you're not going to get cut in the same place again, that you're being respectful of those wounds and changing them. That's why them cycles and things, can repeat and repeat. But we've also been like, there's this, exactly what you said about the Western world, Western cultures. The placebo effect we know is real, right? There's like so much evidence of it. But the other side is that I think about this a lot. Like, if it's true that we can heal ourselves, like I thought it was about 25, but you said 30% of the time, and I trust you more because I'm not very good with remembering figures.
It's in that space.
Around that, it's still a massive amount, isn't it?
Right?
If we can heal ourselves just by believing that it's possible from doing this action or doing this thing, it also means we can hurt ourselves just by doing this action and thinking this way.
Thought alone.
So there's a significant proportion of us who are not allowing ourselves to heal just because we cling on to these ideas, these thoughts, that it's not going to help. And we either don't even try or make ourselves ill through the trying to impress this belief that everything has to be explainable, or there has to be evidence for everything, or whatever it might be. Clinging onto that then actually causes us harm. So like, I love the two extremes of that. And that is evidence. If somebody really needs the evidence, you can, it's
well, the
not
thing is, it does move itself back, right? The component of righteousness, right? Part of that is just making sure you're validating your belief system over here, which in turn can cause you to have the issue, right? And I love how you're 80% of people that go to the doctor go for the word stress alone. So the word stress is a perception, and that perception we know can make us sick. Yeah. But now that's a big piece of what I want to be in the next part of my mountain of life, is teaching people to harness the power of healing themselves, not having something on the outside fix them, right? There's a very difference between cure and heal. We've had these conversations in this podcast around that. Healing and transformation are very different than change and cure, right? Those are outside things affecting our behaviors and our things. And what we're really talking about here in the Beyond the Pills tribe that we have is, how do we harness our own ability to empower ourselves, to take the right steps, to move in the way that says, like, I am the creator of my own world, of my own thing. And how does it match in harmony with the outside of this existence around me? And so I loved how you framed that up, because again, together, not the same, right? It's all around that same process of understanding. But you can put some of this on the intellectual, right? We know through studies, this is why it's called a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Doctors have to have that. But what we didn't realize was, what are those 25, 30% of people that get better off nothing? Like, what is that? And so this is the new humanity. This is where we're going with science and with healthcare, is we're actually untapping that. We're making pharmaceuticals obsolete. And that's not a good thing for pharmaceutical companies. Like, when you heal someone, you lose a customer.
You do.
But so I love acute care medicine. Let's fix that problem. Like, let's sew you up if it's a big gash, and then have your body heal itself, right? But we're in the system of chronic care management in the same lens as acute care management, which is take the medicine, resolve your symptom, but don't get to the root cause and don't heal, right? It's backwards. But now it's like, this is why I think it's such a beautiful place to be alive right now. It's like, we're actually unfolding these things. Again, from the world's perspective, these karma type things is, you're winning or you're learning, and learning is winning, right? You're moving through this process of learning, and bringing these things into the space where now we're having these beautiful conversations around empowering someone to do this work and to be their own healer. right? That's the beauty part of it.
Well, there's a couple of things as well. One is that we can learn. So there's a few things that are just whizzing around now. We can learn all we want, right? And I went through this phase, especially at the beginning of my journey. I'm generally quite inquisitive as well. So I had to take in a lot of knowledge. And I think in this chrysalis phase, we'll refer to it like that, you're learning about yourself, right? So I actually did a lot of work, which is in the life design stuff that I share, collecting data on myself to actually understand what helps and what doesn't, doing a lot of experiments and all that. But nothing changes until you embody it and you put it into action. So you can talk, and a lot of people get stuck here. They can talk about it all they want. They can make up all these ideas and theories all they want. They can be acting in the mask, creating a whole new mask around this facade of healing without actually embodying all of what it means. And it's, like I say, the goop phase is quite deep, and it can be very comfortable at times to think that we can entirely create our own reality. And I'm not saying that's not true. We can control certain aspects of ourselves, of what we put in our body, what we get out, the people we connect with, the environments we go in, all this. But this is kind of what I wanted to just mention as well. There's always that aspect that you can't understand. And one thing that the universe has taught me again and again is anytime that I think that I'm smart enough to have understood what reality is or what life is or how to create something, that I am the master of my own universe, all of that, is that we've no idea how the butterfly creates its wings. And we've no idea, like there is no way to really comprehend that from our tiny little perspective of what that is. So bringing that back to the ground, we don't know why some people live and die. We don't know why necessarily. We can come up with all these theories, if you like, and their ideas and their stories that resonate with us, and they help us find more truth in our own experiences, and they help us relate to the world and each other in different ways. And we can have different intentions as we move through our healing and all that. But we are not this force that creates life, and we are all going to end in the same way. So there's like some humility in that, is what I like to kind of bring it back to. And like I say, I do tend to do, that's why I do both of these things together, the life design and the shadow work, because a lot of what we're doing with healing that people can get stuck in is just a complete fear of the unknown, of being weak, of death, of running away from the inevitable, which is like also when I was talking about, we want this righteousness. We want that. We want this kind of, we want to feel like everything's going to work out, but actually we don't get to choose that. Ultimately, we can do the best that we can. We can learn, we can grow, we can embody all these things, but we are ultimately all heading in the same direction, which I'll make this a little bit lighter and nicer, because I feel like sometimes I do get a little bit dark like that. But we've had the most amazing autumn, right? This year, the weather's been a really interesting year. So last year wasn't a particularly great one. It was very great. So this year, for whatever reason, and just I think where I am, it's just been a really lovely autumn. And because I take a lot of inspiration from nature, there has been the most amazing like leaf fall, and it's been really slow. And I walk the dog in the woods. I live in a very rural place in England. I walk the dog every day, and every day I've been going out, there's been brand new leaves. And I just was given this kind of understanding once again about the cycles of life and death, and as we evolve from maybe a slightly different perspective, which is looking at these leaves. So there's all these leaves off the trees, and they come off the same tree. And there's even trees that are the same species and things, but every single one of those leaves falls at a different time. They fall in a different way. They change color. They come up with all these different patterns. And then they'll all ultimately end up decomposing and just becoming the dirt that keeps the tree alive. Right? And I love watching those cycles because it really does ground me in reality of how accepting nature is of its role, right? So we are creating, with this change in consciousness, we are creating a new world, a new way of being, a new way of existing, a new possibilities for the next generation of humans. Even our generation, we might be lucky enough to be able to really witness some of that shift. But this is like a transformation. This is an ongoing cycle that nature goes through again and again and again. And nature knows what it's doing. You know, nature understands these cycles. And when you watch something like the leaves or the butterflies, like I say, some of the caterpillars that go through their phase, they all go through it because they're being pulled to, just like what we were saying, like you get this pull where you want more and you have to go through this phase. But ultimately it's not for us to choose that pattern. We can't choose what color we turn into when the leaf falls or the pattern on us or where we land and what dirt we become for the tree. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just love looking at that part of it as well, like bringing it all back to some sort of, I'm just loving nature at the minute because I'm like proper in it, in the bubble of it. And that's every time what it reminds me. And that's like a level of surrender, I think, that you get to. Like you can do so much of the healing process and all of that. You can follow our intuition and everything. But ultimately, like I say, there's some sort of force that actually will take us through that and choose where we end up. And you have to
like Seth said, like there's a big and in the middle, right? We have this, we're interacting and we're here to experience this world in our five senses. And I love how you brought back nature because, you know, we need to be in nature more often. Like it's part of my daily routine as well. And I teach it in my daily dozen. And we've had talks on this podcast strictly around that. It was like how our connection to nature actually literally grounds us, like taking your feet off, take your shoes off and like getting on the ground, right? And getting that space where we're connected and earthing us, grounding us in there.
Yeah, getting out of everything up here and bring it through your body because we're here to literally live this experience, you know? That's what I found, like, is you can do so much thinking, and especially on a spiritual journey, when you start getting into it and you're being opened up to all these different realms, possibilities, and all these different ways energy moves, and it's all very mesmerizing. But until you can bring it through your body and just like, we are still like lumps of flesh. We still have needs, and we're all still gonna, you know,
right? Yeah, as above, so below, right? If you can get into this, we were talking about this with my meditation teacher last week too, is like you can get into this etheric space and almost, I just have this like vision of like this balloon just floating out into space. But if it's not grounded, if it's not tethered to the ground, it'll just float out into the nothing, right?
You'll just so
being grounded and getting ourselves, which become like life is a paradox, right? So you can't have one, but we live in that duality of like, it's this or this, because our brains can't wrap ourselves around yes. Like, yes. Like,
and that. This and that. It's all of it. Like I say, it's
just relaxing into that has helped me a lot, right?
Yeah,
because
totally.
you can go down the rabbit hole one way or the other. And sometimes you do. Like it just becomes the thing of your thing, right? Right now I'm looking at, I've done a lot of the modern science piece, but now for me, pulling in a lot of the ancient wisdom, ancient civilizations, learning from all of these past, not because we want to go back there, but because we're going from the age of intelligence back into the age of our heart, right? And moving from here to here, making this part the servant, not the master, and moving us into this more wholeness, right? This is where I feel humanity is moving towards. And doesn't mean we're just getting rid of everything we've learned, but can we all agree, right? There's just some stuff you can't explain. You just can't. And that's okay, right? The okayness is moving past that righteousness, right? Moving through and go, you know what? I have no idea what that thing does in the middle, but at the end, it's a beautiful butterfly, and I don't get to pick whether it's blue, green, yellow, or black, right? I love that. So,
but take it around like full circle back to where we started with the diversity. We don't get to choose the body we're in. That's been chosen by our parents and the circumstances of our birth. We've just got to become that. Try and become all of that potential if we can. If we're lucky enough to be able to like actually get there.
Right. And enjoying the journey. Remember, like let's pause and enjoy the steps. Like you said, I wrote it down too. I say this, you can't skip steps. It's not like you're going to hear this podcast and go, I'm going to go straight to butterfly tomorrow, right? You got to go through the goo. Like everybody has their own version of the goo. And that's for the people, not just because you want it, but because it was chosen for you, right? It's like those things. I tell my kids too, like I always tell them, is like, I have beautiful 8 and 10-year-old daughters. And I was like, thank you so much for choosing me to be your dad. No. Like it's just, there's this thing where you think we make these humans, and then like, no, it's their job. They're doing their own thing. They're becoming who they are. I'm getting out of the way to just allow, like one of my very good mentors taught me this mantra that is deep in for me for a whole last 8 years now, is like, push less, allow more. Doesn't mean don't push. But if we're allowing this to unfold in the way that it's supposed to, but also I always say, and have your part in it, right? If you don't make the choice to get up and eat the right foods today, well, there's going to be a consequence to that. If you don't get out in nature and have exercise and good relationships, you're choosing those things and things unfold. I've found through my experience in this journey that I created for me and that the universe has created for me is when I start making choices that resonate with me. In other words, they energize me. They give me energy. And I move, even though there's sacrifice for other things, other people. But when I made those choices, I generally start to get those synchronicities back to me in some way that reminds me I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important for people, because this whole component of like being the best version of yourself and being fully authentic, but if you throw ego into it, doesn't really work. Like, I'm going to put my boundary down and you're going to get away from me and I'm just doing this for me, like versus that energy that's just more, it's loving in nature. It's regenerative in nature. So that's kind of how
we want to be accepted, don't we? We want to be right. We want to be acceptable. We want to be accepted. So that's why we do the difficult work, the shadow work. We do all this other stuff. Is so ultimately when we can, we're able to show up for ourselves, other people, just by being human. Like, we are having this human experience. We're going through a massive shift at the minute, and that's got real consequences at times for people. And we all have these
right now, right? Like, it's how can we live in this? Because the world's in the goo right now. I feel like that we're in this space of the new humanity's coming through. And again, not everybody gets to play there, but that's the way it is. And so how can you feel like at peace with yourself as the chaos is happening, right? That's kind of the thing that I think we're all kind of moving forward. And I agree. I think if we're lucky enough to be on the tail end of our lives in these bodies, to see some of this come through, which is great. But then future generations, like my girls and maybe their kids, like, oh, wow, this is going to be a fun ride, right? Like learning these new ways of being is it, like you said, it's been this circle, this consistent seasonality of humanity, of the world. It's always going to be okay if we trust this big wheel, this flywheel, to continue to move and to continue to
just allow ourselves to be.
There's always going to be another autumn.
Yeah. We're a part of that.
There's going to be another autumn, you know?
There's going to be different kinds of autumns. There's going to be ups and downs and backs and forths and round and round. Like you can, you know, it's not like you go from A to B. You go and you're living your life. So it's like whatever comes, that's what we've got to respond to ultimately. As much as you might want to think, you know, oh, well, I'll just make this plan, like, especially like say some of the stuff I do with life design is about kind of making a strategy and a plan, how you want your life to be. But actually, there's all sorts of cycles and all sorts of things that are going to happen while you're in that process to work with. And just try your best to be honest with the reality of it. Come out the other side if you can.
That's kind of how I say it. Like where I am is like, if I'm, you know, like there's just this knowing where you can't explain it, but you know it. If you're living your full existence the way that you're supposed to, you pretty much end your day, even though it's a bit of hard, like let's just say like a busy day, but you feel regenerative. You feel energized because you worked that day in the things that felt really good for you, right? And everybody has that right. Like that right is pure. We all have the right to live our full lives the way we're supposed to. So tell people a little bit, like if this resonates with them, because you've got a mentorship, you've got some programs you're moving through. So tell people about what you're doing right now.
I've got a few things going on. I'll talk a little bit about Love School because if you're interested in what we've been talking about, I'm creating 2 courses in tandem at the minute at Love School. Love School is an online community and it's courses. Sometimes I do live events on there and there'll potentially be a membership opening up down the line. But the courses are based around natural holistic recovery. So I just had to get all of this stuff that I'd learned out somewhere in the world. So there's a few courses that are live on there at the minute. There's one about life design, where I share some of the life design tools. And that's very much rooted in permaculture and nature wisdom. Just different ways of actually creating, if you're a thinker and a planner, different ways to consciously choose how you want to recreate your life or how you're going to navigate the reality of a recovery journey. There's a one that's live, which is about inner child healing, something we've not touched on today, but that's part of shadow work. Looking at that first caterpillar phase, if you like, we'll stick with that little metaphor. But what I'm working on at the minute, actually, they're still in process. So depending on when someone sees this, they might be live. One of them is building your energetic power, which is looking at energy, and it's looking at the reality of energy and how to use that to kind of go through the mush phase and understand alchemy, understand how we can use the idea of energy to be able to hold more of ourselves. One of the reasons why we get, or especially for me anyway, that I've had to learn about being authentic is because I've given away my power so much in the past, and there was so much fear around stepping into my own power and what that means and who I am, and being able to talk about stuff like these other experiences I was having and all of that. But I'm actually loving that because it brings together a lot of different kinds of information exploration. So I give a little bit of like my insight, but actually people are invited to explore the themes and the ideas themselves. So we look at nature, we look at energy frequencies, we look at different laws of the universe and things. So it goes from kind of very grounded, very earth, right the way up to kind of exploring spirituality. So it's like all the different realms of energy. The other one is breaking illusions, which has kind of got a really different vibe about it. I spent a lot of time having to recover from ideas in my mind. So the Freedom from Illusion course is really challenging people to look at the mind and start to break open some of the preconceptions, some of the way we've been conditioned when in society, through our families, all that stuff. That's all kind of part of shadow work. Like I say, I kind of do them in tandem. It's just the way my energy works. This kind of, if you want to kind of be more in your own power, then you kind of have to look at where you're giving power away. So they kind of go together. So this is all at Love School, loveschool.uk. I have been putting out videos as well on the YouTube. So if you're interested, they're kind of looking at all different holistic types of healing, shadow work, energy, all that sort of stuff. I only work with a few clients one-to-one because actually I'm a creative. So I like to have a lot of time to just be connecting with nature and being inspired by that to do my own creative flow. But I do open up spaces to work with people one-to-one. And most people who want to work with me are people who are creatives themselves, are neurodivergent, are maybe going through a recovery journey and need more one-to-one. So I do a couple of different containers. One of them is for people who have been like over busy, if you like. That's called The Art of Enough. And that's looking at like how to be happy in a sense of being enough. And then also looking at the things that you've tolerated for too long, overdoing, just finding peace in who you are. Another one is linking our creativity and our emotional processing. So that's more for people who are really struggling to make sense of their emotional internal world. More intuitive people who have more of an artistic flair and stuff. I really got into doing that a few months ago. That's a course as well, actually, that I have released, but I do support people one-to-one with that. And that's brilliant because that's like tapping into this like energetic, emotional language of life, this unexplainable language, and we can use that to actually create, which I love. And then there is a container that I do offer to people when they are literally wanting to work through trauma, which is like maybe we do life design, whereas maybe it's a bit more shadow work focused. And we're kind of looking at the conditions that led to them experiencing trauma, taking on coping mechanisms that aren't helpful. And we kind of look at that and start to like plan a different life. And then I'm a mentor. So I support people with the tools that I have. And rather than me kind of tell people what to do, I just provide that like container for people to explore it within themselves. You know, I don't have any like set, I mean, I do offer the courses and things. I don't have any set prescribed, you must do this to get there. Like I said, you can't really go from A to B. But because I have been through this stuff myself, sometimes we just feel like we want somebody else to work alongside, isn't it? And you need that extra bit of support and someone who understands what you're going through. So that's the sort of thing that I offer.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's the for me, the definition of a guide or a mentor or a guru or a coach, whatever label you need to put on it, right? But we all need coaches. We all need someone that's been a few steps ahead of us. I love how you frame this up because we're not here to show people like, all right, here's the protocol. And you go from page 1 to page 153 and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And like get out of the way, right? Yes, you can read. But it's the journey. We're here. It's like a coach doesn't, like for us sports guys, we got to get this in. But like Michael Jordan had lots of coaches. He was the best in the world at what he did in basketball. That's debatable, everybody, right? But he had coaches and he spent the time to do the work, but he had people alongside of him. They weren't shooting the basketball. They weren't dribbling it for him, but they were there in his journey to guide him along the way. So I love how you frame that up. We're the guide in the journey, but it's the person, right, who does the work. It's their job to be in their space. So I love how it's like, I have the blueprint for what I've gone through. And if these tools are good for you, I'm here to hold space for that so you don't feel alone, right? That's a big thing. You're seen and heard. We need that. but all of us have had some person or something help us along our own path. So I love how you're framing that up.
I think we're guided. We have this. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we have this innate knowing. So, like for me, there's definitely one thing that I always tell people: this word resonate. When you see somebody, or you see something, or you hear something, and it feels right. It doesn't matter. It could even be a temporary rightness. It could just be something that resonates for that time. But once it feels right and you're guided there, that's how you follow. That's how you find your path. You don't want to follow someone else's path, because then you're going to end up in a direction and in a place that you weren't intended to go. You know, you've got your own diversity. So you want to be like, this is the next thing. It's like those little, I can't think what they're called. Wisps. Oh, this is the next thing. And so if people resonate with the type of language that I use or the way I might present things, then they're going to potentially find some of the content. I create as much content as I can. When I'm inspired to do that, like, cause that's exactly how I work. Like I live now all of the stuff that I talk about. So I create based on what resonates at the time. So I put things out. I have a blog and the YouTube channel and things. So there's information that people can, tap into and use for free that's out there. So then they can then get to know whether they might even just want to take that little bit of information, and that's going to help them on their step. And then some people are just drawn and they want to work a little bit closer. So that's why I open up them one-to-ones. But there's we're going to put a few links, aren't we? So the other stuff, everything that I do, and it is a big spectrum because I am a creative, is on the Linktree link. But specifically for what we've been talking about, if people resonate with this, they're probably going to really like the Love School stuff and the blogs, the YouTube. And I would love to have people on there because I'm just building that up, and I'm not one of these people that's just, I can't like get into it. I like creating content, don't get me wrong, but actually promoting it and like doing all that stuff.
I'm the same way. I get what you're saying. Like there's some people that
YouTube and like and subscribe to the channel.
My TikTok, and it's like, no, I'm just putting it out there, and that's why I love Tara. The podcast for me is like, I'm like, it's your job. Go find people to go put eyeballs on it. I get it. I get it. Well, you got your Linktree. We'll post that for people that get to everybody the things that we're doing on for your socials, your websites, your YouTube, loveschool.uk. All this has been so amazing. Thank you for, what I think about this is people that go through their own ascension, their own journey, but then they feel or they just know, right, that they've been chosen to also help others. And that's where you're at. And I firmly believe it's not for everybody, but I believe that you are, I know you're doing what you love to do, and that you are living this beautiful life, but also sharing these experiences for others so they can go from this thinking to the doing, so they can become their own best versions of themselves. So thank you so much for all that you're doing in this world, Terri. I always just say
thank you for having me on the show, on the podcast. It's really nice to have a good chat about
I love meeting these people through the podcast, through these conversations, because we're all kind of the world needs healing, right? We all need healing. And so there's no competition in this space, which makes me so happy, because I don't want to live in the competitive world of, I got to get them, not you. Like there's so many people out there that like you said, if it resonates with them, we have the next steps for them now. We can move them through this space, and everybody's got their own journey. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Stay well. Thanks for joining me today on Beyond the Pills. If our mission to de-prescribe 10 million unnecessary medications resonates with you, share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review. Whether you're a practitioner or someone ready to reclaim your health, visit rx2wellness.com for free resources to begin your journey. Together, let's go beyond the pills and co-create a world of vibrant health and true healing. Until next time, live better and stay well.